Well, good morning, everybody. I hope everybody's doing well today. We're going to get started here in just a minute. A couple of housekeeping things. First off, when you ask a question, this Teams platform does not supply us with the name of the person asking the question, so it will come through to us in an anonymous way. That's fine, and we'll still answer the question. But if you are asking for a more complete follow-up or follow-up emails, please include your name in the question. If not, you prefer to remain anonymous, that's fine too. So I did want to do that. Also, this morning when we talk about this Microsoft funding that's available, we're going to address it within the context of doing an upgrade, specifically from AX to Dynamics 365. But please understand that the same principles happen if you're looking to adopt Power Platform. Microsoft will often fund those projects as well, and we'll talk about that. And it also applies if you are a new customer, if you are coming over from another platform and adopting Microsoft D365. But for the purposes of today, we'll be discussing this within the context of upgrading. But please understand that the same principles apply. My name is Gregor Newland. I've been in the channel since 1997 is when I joined the Dynamics channel, but I have always been on the partner side of the table. So this morning, we have an employee that's been with us a few months, Bobby Small. Many of you may know him. And Bobby comes from a completely different perspective. Bobby, for many years, worked for customers using Dynamics and customers using AX across many versions. So Bobby has been to this rodeo before as a customer. You want to say something about yourself, Bobby?
Yeah. Again, welcome everybody. Like Gregor said, I've been in the channel not quite as long as 97, but starting in 2004, and like you mentioned, on multiple versions of AX and Dynamics, and have gone through the upgrade process a number of times. So when I learned about this funding opportunity, it was actually a pretty big deal to get to know, because it would have been something that, and we'll talk about this later as well, something that would have been very beneficial to me in my end user role supporting Dynamics.
Well, Bobby, I know you're not a shy fellow, so just jump in whenever you like. It's the same with the questions. Ryan, you're monitoring the questions as they come in, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
There's about a 20-second roundabout delay
Okay.
with the live broadcasts. So if you ask a question and they don't get to it right away, it could just be a little bit of delay, but I'll be monitoring that and letting Gregor know. So
thank you very much, because we would like for this to be conversational. If you want to save up your questions till the end, that's fine. But if you want to ask in context, if you want to ask while we're discussing something, some questions for us to drill down on, please do so. And Ryan, feel free to interrupt me, although you've always felt free to interrupt me in the past.
Will do.
Thanks. Okay, let's get started here. So it's time to migrate. You've elected to either add Power Platform or to upgrade from a previous version of AX to Dynamics 365, or you've decided to adopt Dynamics 365. So it's time to do that now. And you're in a position, generally speaking, when we see people migrate or upgrade, it's for these three reasons. Now, there are other reasons that's available, but these are the three main reasons that we see, which is that you have some sort of internal company charter, rules and regs that say you have to be on a version of an ERP software that the publisher supports. As AX 2012 support now sunsets, and AX 2009 has been sunsetted for some time, we're starting to see people coming to us with migrations simply because they need to comply with internal rules. We also see people coming to us because of the cloud ROI. What that means is that, Dynamics 365 is largely a cloud-based solution. Having said that, A lot of people want to save money. They don't want to invest in a hardware refresh and build big data centers. They don't want full-time employees spending their time re-indexing and reconciling SQL databases. They don't want their internal employees spending time improving performance of the application. When you move to the cloud, all of this, all of the responsibilities that I just named, move to Microsoft. Microsoft provides the hardware, so it relieves any pressure on your data center. Microsoft maintains the databases in the application, and Microsoft is responsible for performance. So all of that gets moved from your IT department, and there are generally very large amount of savings, not even to mention licensing. You know, licensing a SQL core can be very expensive, and you have to license multiple SQL cores to put this thing on site. Whereas when you go to the cloud, all of that goes away because it's all included in your licensing cost. The other big reason we see for migrating is to take advantage of additional functionality. That is to say, you see something in the new version that you'd really like to have. Where I see this most often with my commercial clients, it tends to be in the areas of warehousing and shop floor. Generally speaking, now that Dynamics 365 completely supports handheld devices out of the box, many people use this as a way to upgrade to more advanced use of handhelds in the warehouse and on the shop floor, and to eliminate the expense of having to use a third party to do that. So that's what I see. Bobby, is this what you saw when you were migrating your products?
Yeah, I was going to kind of add that the additional functionality sometimes is not even additional, it's just improved over what maybe you had to adopt because either you didn't get the most robust version, like where I was at the last end user, we didn't even purchase the shop floor control module. It was not my decision. It was made prior to my existence with the adoption, but it required then that at some point we had to actually customize a shop floor control, which was functional, but not as functional as what you get out of the box now currently. So it's not just additional, but sometimes improved functionality that you had to adopt. But you're exactly right. All those things resonate with me as an end user because we were running those older versions, which create a lot of stress and an issue around trying to support them. You run into not just the cloud ROI is not just savings in having the hardware on site, but just being at the right version, because at some point the versions of SQL can only go so far, so you can only use an older version based on the version of AX you might be on. So there's limitations there as well. So it kind of eliminates all those things in one fell swoop.
Yeah, that's true, and I don't want to leave out, the scenarios that I gave you were primarily for my commercial customers. As you're aware, I do a lot of work in the public sector as well. And what I find in the public sector is the additional functionality that tends to come up is they want to improve functionality and really refine their procurement methodologies or their project tracking methodologies. And I'm also seeing a huge demand on the public sector side for field service, because they have come to understand that field service is an excellent tool for many parts of their deployment. It's an excellent tool for people who are really doing service work, fixing roads, all that sort of thing, being able to track all that, being able to plan resources around all of that. And it works equally well. In fact, there was a great case study online about this for social workers who are managing cases and updating cases and who need to do paperwork and all of that. They can deploy this out to the field. What used to be a social worker used to, go out in the field and do 5 or 6 hours of work and then come back to the office and spend a couple of hours updating their computer with everything they did for the day. But with field service, they can do it in real time.
Yep.
They can go out, they can pull out their pad that's connected to the cloud, and they can enter case updates and treat it in much of the same way that more service-oriented departments do. So that's what I see out there. That's the demand I see out there in the field. So generally speaking then, when it's time to migrate, it divides the needs of the customer tend to divide into two different categories. That is to say the technical upgrade, which is simply the lift and shift, picking up your existing code, the parts of the existing code you want, and moving them to the new version, picking up the existing data, all your historical data, and moving it to the new version. And secondly, a second project then arises around supplying additional functionality. And it usually divides fairly neatly into those two categories when we're doing a migration. So Bobby, what happens? What happens? You go to management, what do they want to know?
How much is it going to cost? That's, you walk in and they, their shoulders slump and you can immediately see they're waiting to hear how many zeros.
Well, and likely, I'll add to this, they probably want to understand the time frame. Upgrading can be a disruptive process, and when you're working with a partner who knows how to minimize that disruption, that's great. But nevertheless, there is disruption involved in doing this. There is business disruption. So we have found that the time frames also become important to them.
Yeah, they sure are.
Yeah. So I know that feeling. So when you reach out to your partner, what do they say? They generally say, okay, we're fine to help with this, and we'd love to give you these prices, but in order to do that, we need to do two different projects. We need to do an upgrade assessment, and we need to do a fit gap for the additional functionality you've requested. So there you are, and you're thinking, what's that all about? So let's talk about that for a second. So let's just first talk about the technical upgrade. That is just lifting and shifting it, picking it up from the old version, putting it in the new version. So there are generally three pillars of the upgrade. By the way, Ryan, excellent pillars here. Thank you so much. So it's usually licensing, code, and data. These are the three things that need to be considered. So the licensing model for Dynamics 365 has now become a bit more complex than it was in AX 2012. They still divide up the user types, but now there's all sorts of add-ons and things like that for additional functionality. A great example of that is HR. You have to license these people to access HR separately, even though it's part of the same system. Microsoft is now licensing it separately. The divisions between people in finance and people in supply chain, all of this. So what used to be a fairly straightforward spreadsheet exercise has now become, well, it's still a spreadsheet exercise, but it's much more complex than it used to be. It's not so complex that you need to be afraid of it, but you literally have to do a user census. So understanding how many users do this or how many users do that, while it's important, what's more important is how those communities overlap, so that we can get to an actual user count. You may have an individual who not only deals with finance, but deals with HR. So that individual, you can't just license them one way. You have to do, a finance-based license and an HR add-on, that sort of thing. So the traditional user censuses that we are provided are not enough. It does require rolling up your sleeves and really getting down into what the individual users are doing. You can work in blocks. If you have 20 or 30 users who do the same thing, you don't have to visit each and every one of those users, but you do need to break it down into user communities, because otherwise you're not dealing with the overlap and you're costing yourself too much money. The next thing is the code. So what Microsoft does is they have provided partners with a tool. And that tool says, okay, we're going to look at your old code when it comes from AX 2012, and we're going to tell you what code conflicts you have in moving this to Dynamics 365. Now, it's a spreadsheet with thousands and thousands of lines, and if you look at it, it scares you to death. It doesn't scare us. We've done this so many times that 9 out of 10 of the things on that report are simple syntax changes in the code that need to be made, but some of them represent actual code conflicts. And that is to say, you have made a change to the code in AX 2012 to do things in a very specific way that's tailored to your business. If Microsoft in Dynamics 365 has rewritten that line of code, then what happens is a code conflict, and we simply need to work with the business to see, do you want to use Microsoft's new methodology for accomplishing this business function, or do you want to bring your code over from the old version and do it the way you were doing it? And it requires some interface with the business to understand that, but those are usually the minority of code conflicts, but they're the most important ones. And then there's data. So when you make changes to the code, oftentimes you have added tables to the database. And as the database has become normalized and much more of a relational database, the database structure has somewhat changed. So honestly, the amount of time and money needed to convert data is not based on the size of your database. It really doesn't have much to do with that. It has more to do with if you've added tables, if data table relationships have changed. And again, Microsoft provides partners with a set of tools that they can run against the database and allow partners to give you a sort of a very close estimate of what it's going to take to update your data. Bobby, is this what you saw when you did upgrades?
Yeah, no, this is exactly, we didn't have the licensing issues necessarily in my end user experience because I was going from older versions and was still on kind of that older licensing model. But your points are resonant as far as how you go about organizing, and you want to make sure you're not overpaying or misaligning your licensing needs. So it's important to kind of map that out ahead of time. And then with the code and the data, all valid points. And the data, just add as well that during this process, at the time where you'll likely get in and look at all the old data you're not going to bring along, or you're going to silo into a data warehouse or some other data pool that you'll access, but it won't be a part of your live environment. So you're not weighing down that new environment with data that's not needed to function going forward.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that most of my clients have not opted for a data warehouse. They have opted to keep it in one system. I had a public sector client recently. We moved 17 years of historical data into their new system, which was fine. It works, it's there. I don't want people to understand, I don't want people to think this is mightily complex or mightily expensive, but it is time consuming and it's got to be done. So then when you talk about adding additional functionality, you enter what we call a fit gap process. And the way a fit gap process works is that appointments are set up with your SMEs to discuss process flows, what they're actually doing with their day. Outside data sources, are they connecting to some outside data source? Like, your people in finance are probably sending files over to a bank, whether you're using Positive Pay or you're using some form of automated bank reconciliation functionality. You also could have outside data sources for things like prices from suppliers, all of that sort of thing. So we need to fully understand that. And this is my favorite, which is the tribal desktop secrets. So let me explain this to you. This is my phrase. What we found is that often within your enterprise, there are people who have something on their desktop, a spreadsheet, cheat sheet, or they built themselves a little database or some way they can shortcut and make their job easier because the system had a gap in it. People are smart. When the systems have gaps in them, they'll create their own tools. So often when you're doing an overview of functionality, these things are missed. And really, these things can usually be sucked up into the system. And it's really dangerous to have somebody out there who's got some sort of short-term or shortcut functionality that they're using. It's kind of dangerous. What if something happens to that person and nobody else knows about this? The city bus theory. So just be aware that one of the things that we're usually trying to uncover in a fit gap is, are you doing this sort of thing? So I guess what I'm trying to stress here is when you're doing a fit gap, simple summaries of functionality, will the PO, accept 22 characters in the title field? I mean, that sort of thing. It's important and we need to cover it. But what we really need to understand is not just functionality, but how the functionality is flowing throughout the system. So it requires some appointments with the end user. Once that's done, then you can come up, what fits? What happens out of the box? It's not free because it happens out of the box. It still has to be configured. It still has to be tested. But what fits and what are truly gaps? And then in those gaps, what are the costs of those gaps? If you need to make a change, you need to add an extension to the code to do this or that, then you can't really make a rational decision about whether you want to do it or not unless you understand the cost of it and you understand the cost, how it affects the overall project. So when we do a functionality review, we really need to understand the cost of those gaps so that you can make a decision based on fact rather than speculation. The third thing we have to talk about is the cost of integrations. That's usually not covered anywhere in just functionality overviews. So we have to understand, what are you connecting to? I'll use the bank again as an example. There are 2 or 3 major banks, actually maybe even more than that now, where basically the integration is available out of the box. But if you have a smaller or regional bank, we may have to customize the integration for talking back and forth electronically with banks. So we need to understand what you're trying to accomplish and provide this review. And this is even maybe the most important thing, because the first 2 points are blocking and tackling. But this is where the true value add comes in. Most people want to involve their internal team, whether they be developers or IT people or even SMEs. They want to integrate them into the project in such a way that they can not only be primary adopters and product champions, but they can provide future support for your end users. In other words, they want to roll up their sleeves and get into the new system so that they really understand it, so that you can at some point tell partners like me, oh, we don't need you anymore, or we'll only need you every now and then because we've got the knowledge in-house now to support ourselves. We fully support that. We completely understand. But we also need to understand what these people can contribute to the project, to the upgrade project, or to the fit gap project. So we need to analyze your internal skill sets. We need to understand what they can contribute and what they can't, because that is going to affect the overall cost of the project and it's going to affect the time frame. So this may be the single most value add of any of this. Bobby, am I missing anything here?
No, I had a couple of points as you were going through there. Number one, I love tribal desktop secrets. You hear tribal knowledge, nice spin on what that is, and you're not at all wrong there. If a company online thinks that they don't have this in their organization now, I guarantee you do. I mean, just spend a day with somebody and you'll see. These folks, your subject matter experts, your people out there are finely tuned athletes, and when they get a hurdle thrown in front of them, they're going to jump it. They're going to find a way around it and keep moving because that's what they do. And they just, like you said, they just catalog these things and it just becomes part of their daily routine. And you do have to go back and find them because you want to help incorporate those so they're not out of the box. They're not out of the system. They're in the system and you understand what's going on there. And the gaps, the fits in the gap, the fit gap, I mean, that's an important piece that it took me a couple of rounds to understand. Going through this process, what the importance there is and the cost around that. And then the last thing you said was interesting, in that the time when you're sitting down to begin this process, it is a great time to identify those people in your organization that have that spark that you can empower to be a part of this process, so that they, if they're not already subject matter experts, that they're going to become them and they're going to feel great coming out of this. They're going to be fully bought in because you're giving them the opportunity to grow in this process. So yeah, that's an important piece. I've seen that happen a number of times where you've got somebody who's doesn't have that experience, then they come out of a project like this feeling on top of the world because they've just tackled one of the biggest things you can do in an organization.
So we talked about these two projects, the upgrade project and adding additional functionality. I don't want people to think these are overly complex. I don't want people to think these are overly expensive, but they are there. And your partner is going to want to talk with you about this. So you reach out to your partner and the partner says, okay, I need to do an upgrade assessment and an additional functionality fit gap, and it's going to take, and I can give you what you want, but it's going to cost you money. Oh, when you ask your partner for an estimate, they're going to say, I need to do these two things to really give you a dead-on estimate. Anything else would just be an educated guess. And they're going to say, we see two projects here. We see we need to do a technical upgrade, so we've got to assess that, and we've got to assess the additional functionality you've got. And then they hit you with the really fun part, which is that this is going to take billable resources to get this done, because business analysts, architects, and functional consultants have to get involved. So generally, this is out of the purview of typical sales and sales support people. You actually have to pull billable resources from the field to get this done, and that costs the partner money. So the partner is going to turn these into billable projects. So now what do you do? Have you been in this position, Bobby?
I was going to say that this for me was something that took a couple of turns to kind of really understand where the partner was coming from. My initial gut reaction, I'll be honest, was, what? I'm not going to pay for this. You should do this for free. This should be a free thing. Or, man, just give me a number. Give me a number, any number. I just want a number that I can go back to my like you talked about, or go back to the management with. I just need a number and some time. And somehow I expected, folks like, partners out there to just materialize this with some confidence. And that was a mistake. I said I didn't quite fully understand in the first iteration of my end user experience what went into this process. And as I grew to understand it, I grew to become more comfortable with the idea that, hey, there is a value to this, and it is important that we get it right to set the project up for success. Because if I just ask for a number and a time and you give me, okay, great, X amount of dollars and X amount of time, I'm going to hang my hat on that. That's going to be exactly what I am going to remember throughout the project, and it's going to create issues. I guarantee it. So it really is better to do the diligence and dig in and do this this exercise to get where you need to be to have a successful project upgrade, whatever it is. If it's like you said, additional functionality, add-on or upgrade, you got to do the diligence to be successful.
Did you ever try to take this conversation to management? How did they react?
Even once I recognized it, coming to them with this fit gap process and the cost associated was kind of met with the same reaction that I initially had. Like, oh, can't these companies do it for free? We want somebody to do it for free, and so then so I'd already kind of won that battle with myself, but then it's kind of, now I got to turn this battle over to the upper management and the folks writing the checks, and it's always a tough sell. You've got to have the right management team in place that really understands it, and it's rare to find that kind of right out of the gate. So it's a lot of work.
So Microsoft has heard this, and many of us who belong to executive committees or content advisory boards with Microsoft, we have provided this feedback to Microsoft. We've said, look, in order to get this done, we're running into this barrier, and it's delaying cloud adoption. So Microsoft has a term that they use internally, that their salespeople use, called dark to cloud. That is to say that they're on older versions of the product and they need to move them to the new cloud versions, or move them to Dynamics 365, or get them to use PowerApps. And they understand, and these salespeople know that this is one of the biggest barriers in getting this done. And they needed help to accelerate this, to accelerate the change. So the response to Microsoft is, Microsoft, you're going to have to put some money on the table. You're going to have to help these customers pay for this so that they can move ahead in a cogent fashion. So what Microsoft did was they created a lot of funding programs. And I use the expression alphabet soup on this slide because they all have acronyms. All of these various programs have acronyms. And what these programs allow us to do is to say, you need to do these two projects, or you need to do one or the other. You need to look at your technical upgrade assessment. You need to look at a fit gap assessment. And Microsoft will ostensibly pay for it. So, and we've had a huge amount of success with this because they're happy to fund these technical upgrade assessments. They're happy to fund these additional functionality fit gaps. Now, they're not just throwing money away. The amount of money that they're willing to spend is based on what your eventual license spend will be with Microsoft, but they do provide money to get this done. And I'm constantly shocked that there are customers and even partners out there who are not aware of this, that these things are available. They're relatively easy to access, and it really doesn't cause much delay. They'll even pay, if you're going to use PowerApps, they'll even pay for the ideation sessions where you can whiteboard what you want to do with the PowerApp and run a pilot program to make sure that it works. Before you ever license it or deploy it, they will pay for this. And again, I am constantly shocked at the number of, I mean, were you aware of this when you were a customer, Bobby?
Yeah, it's a tragedy and a comedy, Gregor.
Yeah.
It's a tragedy that I was not aware of it. No, I went through a number of upgrades were okayed, and we went through them fine. But there was a number of years where I was attempting to move from an older version of Dynamics AX to D365, and it was just a slog to try to get the fit gap approved through my management. And I worked with the partner on many occasions to come in and help us close the gap, and not once did I ever hear about this funding. So that's the tragedy. The comedy is I'm happy and excited to share it now. I mean, it's awesome that I know about it now. We can get this word out, but certainly would have loved to have had this benefit when I was going through the process.
Well, and I think that's it. And I'm not surprised when customers don't know about it. What I'm really surprised is that partners aren't pushing it, that I don't see a lot of evidence of this. Often when I talk to partners who want to do an upgrade, move from one version to another, or add functionality, and I bring this up, customers are shocked. Like, what are you talking about? And it comes back to, did your old partner know about it? Okay, so it's pretty easy. Once we've identified who your Microsoft rep is, we have a conversation with them and we say, this is what their eventual license buy is going to look like, and here's what they need. Okay, and then if your partner doesn't know about these offerings, there's a problem here that only you can solve. Now, only certain partners are approved vendors for this. However, it's open to any partner who can meet the approval standards. So it's not as if it's some closed community or special partners or anything like that. It's just partners who want to invest in the learning curve. And so if your partner doesn't know about these offerings, then it's going to slow you down, because they need to go find out about these offerings, they need to understand the offerings, and they need to get themselves approved. So if you're trying to, sort of apply some acceleration to this process, if your partner doesn't already know about these offerings, you may have a problem. So how does it work? It's easy. Your partner maps it to the appropriate Microsoft program out of that alphabet soup of programs. This one will work for the fit gap assessment. This program will work for the upgrade. And once your partner has identified which program to use, then the partner just goes to the Microsoft rep and says, look, I want to leverage this program to pay for this so that the customer doesn't have to pay for it and we can accelerate the adoption process. And the Microsoft rep, once they're on board, is usually your most effective lobbyist to get this done quickly. The approval usually takes plus or minus 10 days. I've seen them come through as quickly as 48 hours. And I've seen them take up to 10 days, 10 business days. It just depends on how busy they are at the time, but approval is usually is just basic blocking and tackling. Once the Microsoft rep is going to advocate for it, you're basically done. They're basically signing off because they have a pool of funds they could draw through. And then Microsoft issues a PO direct to the partner. We get these purchase orders directly from Microsoft, and they say, okay, go do this for this prospect. Go do your fit gap assessment or go do your upgrade assessment. And then Microsoft pays us directly. So the customer doesn't even have to get involved in any of this. So Bobby, would it have been easier if when you went to your management and said, I have to do, in order to give you a price that this partner is going to want to do this work for us, I have to go through these 2 projects, but guess what? Microsoft's going to pay for them. How would your management have reacted to that?
That would have been party time, right? I mean, the disco ball would have dropped out of the CEO's office, and the bar would have folded down out of the wooden panels, and it would have been definitely a huge benefit. Obviously, there's no doubt about it.
So, the projects begin, and off we go. What do you get? So for the technical upgrade assessment, you generally get a code conflict report, the full database analysis, a timeline, and a budget, which is what you wanted in the first place. But
a true one too. This one's true. Yeah. This is not just some kind of off the cuff estimate that you're forcing a company into. This is a truly developed timeline and budget.
That's right. I mean, a detailed timeline, a detailed budget, a project plan, all of these things, as well as a licensing estimate. So that, again, folks, this is real money. So let's not spend our time ballparking. Let's get some actual dollars. Okay, so you can expect these deliverables from a technical upgrade assessment. And guess what? On the additional functionality, you can accept the same type of deliverables. You'll receive back the fit gap, so you have it for your records. You'll have a timeline and a budget, a detailed project plan with that division of responsibilities, which is so important, and a licensing estimate. Okay, these are the things that you can expect to get from these, and in most cases, it's free. But it does require time and it does require effort. So now, when you go talk to management and say, I want to do this upgrade, and management says, well, how much it's going to cost? Have you got a project plan? What's the timeline? You've got it all. You've got all the information they want. Bobby, how often were you a hero at work?
Well, Gregor, I was always a hero at work,
oh,
but this likely would have exalted me to like a pantheon level. There would be maybe some type of marble statue erected. I don't know. I mean, ERP transformations, that's huge in a company that can make everybody's lives so much easier, and to get something like that done and be able to kind of follow that through is, again, it's a huge accomplishment, and this is just one great tool to really get you along the road to making that happen.
So what do we suggest? And this is the only time I'm going to be a sales guy on this call, is call us. If your partner doesn't know how to do this, if your partner's unaware of this, which is kind of a red flag. I mean, I get emails about these programs every day as a partner. So if your partner's not aware of it or doesn't know how to do that, call us. We know how to do it. Even if maybe eventually you want to use another partner, we can certainly work with you on these 2 projects so that you have a realistic idea of what it's going to cost. And you'll have a realistic idea of how long it's going to take. And most importantly, your resource utilization during the projects. Look, some people want a latchkey system. some people are like, we need you to minimize the involvement in our people, and we understand that we'll pay more for post-project support because of that. And some people want their people elbow deep in the project. They want them in there, they want them to understand, so that you, over the course of time, decrease your reliance on your partner for support because you've built in-house subject matter experts. And then someone always falls somewhere between those two extremes. So it's really important for your company culture that division of responsibilities is part of your deliverables. But if you have a partner who doesn't understand this, or you're looking to explore it more, call us. I mean, this is something we do all the time. I can't tell you how many of these we've done, because it's just an easy way for us to move it forward. Bobby, you have anything to say in conclusion?
It kind of leads right into one thing I wanted to impart, and is that, having now been a part of some of these from the partner side, I do see how easy it is for the end user, from their side, so that top of the iceberg is like, hey, look, I get this free funding. Somebody's giving me this great resource and a fit gap and a timeline and budget. And what Ellipse has done, and what we've gotten good at, is that bottom half of the glacier, and that's the hard work to get to this point, to understand how to get the funding, how to work with Microsoft to make it an easy process for folks out there looking for this free money.
So I'm consistently surprised by how quickly this happens. When these programs first started, I thought, oh Lord, what am I going to go through to get approved for this? How many hoops am I going to have to jump through? But Microsoft isn't very good in creating types of projects that we can easily align with. So all we have to do is say, yep, it aligns with this type of project. Here's the statement of work, and off we go to the races. I'm consistently surprised at how easy this is. So that's what surprises me even more, when people aren't doing it. So there you go.
Yeah. Satya's got his checkbook open. We gotta make sure we're taking advantage of that.
Yeah, if Microsoft's going to throw money on the table, let's take it. So Ryan, have we had any questions during this?
Actually, don't currently have any questions lined up right now. So I'm going to give it a little bit, a couple seconds here with the delay. If anybody has any questions to wrap up.
All right. So we've got that 20-second delay, and that's about up now. So folks, I'm going to give you back 15 minutes of your day. Thank you very much for attending, and please reach out to us. You can reach out to me. You can reach out at info@ellipsesolutions.com. If you know me or Bobby, we can't see. You're all anonymous on this call, so I can't see who's on this call. So if you know us and you want to reach out to us about this, please do. Let us help you. Let's leverage these programs from Microsoft. Anything else, Bobby?
No, I appreciate everybody attending, and like I said, happy to get this important information out there. So thanks, Gregor.
Thank you, Bobby.
I
And
did have a
thanks
question
everyone
here.
I'm sorry?
Question. What about reimplementation of D365? So not necessarily an upgrade or migration, but a reimplementation.
Yeah, so what that implies is a very large fit gap. Okay, if you're just going to re-implement from scratch, generally people who are doing this don't care for what they did in AX 2012 and felt like it was not really hitting all the marks, or they're coming from an earlier version like 4.0 or AX 2009 or something like that. So that's going to be a much larger fit gap. So, but nevertheless, Microsoft, as part of a dark to cloud account, is liable to help pay for it. Now, when you get into something that large, which is re-implementing the entire system from scratch, then there are some limitations to what they will fund. So you may find yourself in a position where they won't pay the full amount, but they're liable to pay a very, very significant amount. I had a customer do this, and they paid something like 70% of the cost of getting it done, because that fit gap has to be done for a re-implementation. And for those of you on the call who, just you know, the difference between an upgrade and a re-implementation is an upgrade is we're going to take existing stuff and move it forward. A re-implementation is we have to re-architect the entire thing from scratch. Anything else out there, Ryan?
I think we're good to wrap up here. So.
All right, folks. Well, thank you very much. Have a nice day. Any parting words? Anybody else? Okay. Have a good day, folks. Bye-bye.